All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the closing presentation for your 2021 GIS Day. I want to thank all of you for taking the time and sticking around and talking with us a little bit now about data strategy. We have had over 430 participants this week, and honestly, the interaction in the chat and everything has just been spectacular. So I would like to continue that. You all are still able to put your comments and things in the chat as we're kind of going through this presentation, but I'll start here. My name is Megan Compton. I'm our State Geographic Information Officer, and I'm happy today to close this day, the GIS Day, out with a talk about data strategy, present and future. You've heard us talk, I guess, a lot this week about tools and strategies and projects, and I really want to take a shift here to just discuss the data. In this case, primarily geospatial data. In our talk on this, it's driven really by our need to be smarter on storage, processing, hosting, and really seizing the opportunities to improve how we do business and how we serve our data. So we've been talking about this roadmap for a while, and I'll show that in a little while, but I recently had an opportunity to sit on a panel and talk about data strategies and data-driven decision making. And I was able to actually learn a lot from my fellow panelists about the velocity of data, understanding the speed of the collection. The accuracy is so important. We know that the increase in the integration of data changes the way that we are doing business. It changes the speed of availability. And it's greater than the governance structure. And greater than that is absolutely the use of metadata and the need for that. And this really transcends across all data, not just the geospatial data. So it really is a timely discussion to think about this strategy. And the greater impact of the data work that we do is made clear through a number of projects, programs, policies, and the populations that are impacted. One, I want to take a second and mention here the Geospatial Data Act. This was passed in 2018 and something that's being worked on heavily at the national level, but impacts us greatly, and we impact the way that it can change the way that government entities do business. The GDA, the Geospatial Data Act, solidifies the committees and the processes and the tools that are used to develop and drive and manage the national spatial data infrastructure. You all may have heard us in the past talk about the SDI. For us, it's the state spatial data infrastructure. But the GDA recognizes the responsibilities of the government for the development of a spatial data infrastructure. It reflects the growing recognition of the essential role of geospatial data and technology in understanding and managing our world. And it also highlights the need to support their continuing development of the critical investments for the nation. And what we do here in Indiana has that impact. The national impact is significant, but so is the local and state level impact. And what we do makes a difference for Indiana. What we do is noticed and sometimes replicated around the country. The projects that are impacted by what we do with data in Indiana: census, broadband, open data, NextGen 911, and these are just a couple of major projects that when you walk out of your office and talk to somebody about the way that GIS data impacts their work, these are things that they might recognize. So I encourage you to have those conversations. So I used to think about this in terms of what I would call a data life cycle. And this diagram here has taken a few different iterations over the last year or two for me. And really, it's just kind of something that I just kind of hang on to in my notes, thinking about the way that data changes and the way that we need to change with it. That's the life cycle. Where we've gotten to now is more of a data operations model. And for the next steps for Indiana data strategy, it's the need for a strong and reliable data operation model. At this time, I think it looks something like this. It's integrating, testing, improving, distributing, and then archiving. So I'm going to take some time here and go through some of these steps and talk to you about how our office, the Geographic Information Office, and with your help and support, are taking the steps to improve our data operation model. Some of you, many of you, I hope, joined in for one of the presentations earlier today from Marianne Cardwell and Sean Scholler that talked about the intricacies and the impact of the data harvest. The data harvest collects addresses, roads, parcels, and government boundaries from every county. And in fact, as of this week, we were able to say that we have every county boundary, every county's parcels, addresses, and roads. And we have a number of other interesting boundary layers too. For those of you who are able to participate in the Government Geospatial Coordinators Forum, we dove really deep into the discussion of boundaries, and you'll hear us talk about that a lot more over the next several years, really. It continues to become differently needed and differently integrated into our data, into our daily work, and the way that we serve up our applications and projects. The ways that we move ahead with this integration might be enabling a person of contact for each agency to be able to be a data steward. We talk about who is the responsible party, who's the one who gets to maintain the data, and who's the one who gets to make the updates. That would be that data steward. And then assign them a list of the layers that they maintain and set the maintenance schedule for. So in the data harvest now, we collect everything once a year. We might see that change depending on the need for the applications that we're serving. The framework data layer collection, and then the incorporation of new layers, like I talked about, different boundaries. We might see while we're collecting framework data layers now, that those framework layers, what it means to be a framework layer might change. We might see new layers that are necessary for the functions of the state and of its citizens, and those deemed critical layers. So we could see that changing in the way that we integrate the data into what we do. So on to testing. It's essential that we test the data. And we test it within our office and within our partner agencies through geocoding, through application building. We have a lot of applications that just people that come to us and don't necessarily, they don't want a map, but they want a function. And we're able to take the data that all of you have provided and turn that around into really nice geocoding tools. And those serve those applications that need to be built. We're also testing it in different ways because we're open for feedback. We're open to saying this doesn't work or this might be better. Those groups within the Indiana Geographic Information Council that are helping to create data standards for our office, and we'll talk about those in just a minute, but data standards for the state that are recommended to the office are critical. Then we're able to be open for grading. So what you see here is the NISGIC Geospatial Maturity Assessment. So this is a national assessment done by NISGIC, the National States Geographic Information Council, every 2 years, where they grade every state. And they grade us on about 12 or 14 different items. And I'll be happy to, sometime I think early next year, share our 2021 grade with everyone. But slight hint, we did go up, so that's exciting. But when you're getting graded from a national rubric on how your data looks, it's being compared across the country. And it's being compared by folks and graded by folks who really understand the gravity of the importance of those data sets and how it impacts the national address database, how it impacts census, how it can change the way that we do wayfinding and change the way that we serve up our applications and serve things to our citizens. So the grading is an important way of being tested and seeing how we can make improvements. So on that, I'll talk about how we're changing the way that we're serving data and hosting it. In this case, our office is making a major transition and moving our ArcGIS enterprise into AWS, into Amazon Web Services. This has been a really interesting project, and we've all learned a lot. But like I said in the beginning, we didn't start off the data up or the upgrade of this of the enterprise. We didn't start off thinking we were going to do an AWS. We started off knowing we needed to move to the new version. We needed to make several different changes. We needed to migrate to different servers, and we were going to make a bunch of changes. It occurred about halfway through the project that we might have another way of doing this. So we extended the time of the project and really took a pretty big leap, looked at what some other states have done, looked at what some other counties have done, and been able to now set our chart our course, forward into Amazon Web Services. I look really forward to early next year being able to kind of walk everyone through what that process looked like and how we made that migration. Now, how we do that within our office has an impact on a lot of different state agencies as well. So it's really critical that when we make those improvements, we're not doing them in a vacuum, that we're doing them while we're taking into account all of the different things that need to happen in the state agencies for their applications to function and for them to be able to to have reliable services and everything be available for their employees and their citizens that they serve. So that's one way that we're making improvements in our infrastructure right now. We have a roadmap for our data sharing improvements. You heard me talk about the data harvest. We have 100% participation from every county. Thank you so much. We've also integrated some data standards. And where we're going next is to be able to look into data filters, two-way data sharing, and reliable and validated data. If we keep pushing forward and keep trying to make these improvements, where we can go is, well, just the sky's the limit, right? Okay, so one thing that we've talked about now, we've talked a little bit about data standards. I mentioned earlier data governance. And take all of that together, and to me, I've heard this new phrase, data hygiene. It's kind of fun to see how many different phrases you can kind of throw together. But the cleanliness of the data all is determined and by your governance and your standards. This here actually is a picture from my kitchen counter. This I was thinking about data standards and the need to really keep them. They must be in place, right? They're very critical. But data standards to me are a little bit like a succulent plant. They're great for us to have and to nurture and to maintain, but they don't have to be touched very often. As I've learned while trying to care for a houseplant during the pandemic, less is more for a succulent plant. So certainly less is more for data standards. For me, that resonates. By having data standards in place, they are reliable. They are the foundation, but you need to make some changes, but not too many at one time. And you need to make some adjustments, or you just need to check on them and see if they're doing okay. So check frequently, but don't water them too often, in this case, succulents. I also think really that incremental improvements, not dramatic leaps in data standards and data governance, are what really creates sustainable change. As we iteratively move ahead, right? So in our data harvest this year, we shared out a new set of data standards. We set the goalpost for what we want to see for data from the framework data layers that we collect from the counties. And in setting that goalpost and setting up those standards, we're really hoping to get that small incremental change from counties, from the partners, and understanding and testing as we go through those changes as well. But I think that makes them more sustainable and more reliable. So smarter data hosting and smarter partnerships. We are making really new strides in how we may be able to host our imagery as well. So this icon here for the Amazon S3, this is something that Sean's working on. We're trying to see how we can possibly change the way that we work with the imagery, and if we can change the way that we host it from expensive and sometimes difficult to maintain physical infrastructure to move it into the S3 cloud. You might have heard of talk about open topography. Open topography is a partnership where we have our LiDAR data hosted and our elevation data. This is a really neat hosting site, and if it weren't for a lot of our partners around the state, it wouldn't happen. So I there's also some our new Indiana Open Data site, Indiana Map 2.0, and I'm going to skip over to that in just a second. I'm going to talk about archiving real quick. So in archiving the records, it's important that we work with our partners. So we try to coordinate with Indiana Archives, Records Administration, the Indiana State Library. In talking with Katie Springer, I know that we can do this in a different fashion. So archiving is an area in which I really hope to learn a lot more. And I really hope that we can work with our partners to improve some of that and make sure it's clear about how data is archived. What might also be a smart idea is if we just share some archiving strategies and share some best practices. And that's actually something that we've been working on with the IGIC Data Archive Committee. And Teresa, I think, might be on the call, but I'm going to try and post this link in the chat if I can in a little while. I'll try and post this here. This is a link to a survey that we would like for you to take to tell us a little bit about your current archiving practices. Because with this committee, we'd like to set up some of those best practices and share those out with folks. I've heard from county government, from city government, we don't know how long we should hang on to our data. Data's getting bigger, right? It takes up more space, especially things like imagery, especially as you receive your current imagery. When we go from a 12-inch product to a 6-inch product, we're delivering 4 times as much data. That's going to have an impact on the way that you might keep it and the way that you might archive it. So having an archive strategy that is clear to you, clear to your organization, is a way that we can definitely move forward. Okay, I'm going to try and switch my screen here. And I want to show you something I'm extremely excited about. Amanda, can you see my webpage?
I absolutely can. The Indiana Open Data page?
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Okay. This we've been talking about for a long time, and I'm really excited to show it to you today. This is Indiana Map 2.0. We have a new Indiana Open Data site that our office is serving up for, or will be serving up for public consumption of data. So many of you might be familiar with the Esri Hub platform. That's what's being utilized through this site. And before we get started, I want to thank our partners with GeoConvergence who are helping us with our data migration and the movement of the enterprise, and supporting in the way that we are hosting our data at the state and making it publicly available as well. And I also want to thank the Indiana Geographic Information Council, IGIC's working groups that helped us create a checklist that helped us understand what it is that people want to see. It's taken us a couple of years to get here, a couple of years of asking, what do you want to see out of the next Indiana map? How do you want your public data to be accessed? What's important to you? What's important for your constituents? What's important for your agency? And we listened and we gathered information, and we have a new site. So here at the top, you'll see a few different buttons that are available, and I'll come back to that very head page. I'm also signed in here, so we'll talk more about the functionality of this and how we get to all the data when we're more prepared for this live launch. Right here at the top, we're going to provide things in the latest updates. So as soon as you visit the site, you can identify and see what's changed, what's new. And that'll just be very easily visible right here. Then we scroll down and we see Indiana in the news. These are going to be things that we see right now that are absolutely necessary for the public to know about, for the GIS community to see, and also highlighting current projects. What's in the news? I can see a lot of things in thinking about Dr. Weaver's presentation from the opening keynote. I can see how GIS is helping Hoosiers, putting some of those Department of Health pieces in this area. I can see any sort of projects and things that are happening around the state and sites that can help enable people to do their jobs better as well. Public Wi-Fi and broadband is a huge topic. The infrastructure bill is going to change the way that we do a lot of these things. So it's important for us in Indiana to show where we can find out broadband availability and where we can look for the data that's necessary to understand where coverage is happening. There's a lot of policy behind broadband, and that's important for us to highlight so that we're bridging that gap, right, between the GIS folks and the folks who actually need to be able to utilize the data to make the smart decisions. The idea behind this Indiana in the News is to keep not only GIS folks enabled or up to date on things, but also the general public, anybody who visits. And scrolling down, we have popular apps and resources. These are things that will flip around. These will kind of go in and out. These are things that we see or you've told us about that are really important to you. Data that you need to access frequently. So these would be places to go that it will open up a new page and take you to another site. We're not hosting the data from this area here, right here on this open popular apps and resources. I think you can see my cursor. This would link you to sites that have other data sources. Okay, now to the data gallery. Now this might look similar or familiar to some of you who have worked with Indiana Map. This might be called the layer gallery. And what did I do? Sorry about that. We're back. Okay. So in here, we have categories of data that we think are necessary. So the data gallery here can point to feature services. It can point to shapefiles. I'll give you an example here real quick. So if we go into the government area, here we have, oh, perfect. We have some really recently updated congressional data. So over here on the left-hand side, you can see that we have the ability to look at feature services or find shape files, look to see which image services or connect to another hub page. You can also determine if you're sharing with the team or your organization. So I'm just going to click here on the 117th district. So this is going to bring up within the hub site, within the same page, brings up the data set that we expect to see. This is your preview. Now you can over here view the table of the data if you would like to. This is where you would find the data for download as well. So if you would like to, you connect this through a feature service, and or you can download it through a CSV, KML, shapefile, file geodatabase, GeoJSON, Excel file. And just know it might take a little bit of time, but it certainly is available in a lot of different formats for you to download. Okay, I'm going to go back out of this. And up here at the top, we have Map Viewer, Popular Apps, back to our data gallery. Some more things on the contact. You'll see that more in the future and in the news. I'm going to go back over here to the Map Viewer. Now this will open up a new page in an open data viewer. And looks like, again, we have these, the congressional districts. So I can look over here and see what's an auto load on the open data viewer site. So this is, again, the 117th district, and I can turn this on and off. If I want to, I can go over here and add data from this area. Now, one of the things that I think is really neat here is you can add data from within the data gallery. Any layer that's available in the data gallery can then be loaded into this map. And you can see it right here, right? You don't have to go back and forth and try and find it and then add it. For me, this flow makes sense. From here, you can also go to load data from outside of your organization if you'd like to. You can connect through a URL. If you'd like to connect to another feature service or web service, you also can bring in your own file if you'd like and load it into this map viewer. As long as you're signed in, you're able to also save this map, and that can be available for later use if you'd like. So from here, let's see, I will take this brownfields map. So we want to talk about brownfields by congressional district. All I have to do is click add and it brings the data into the map. I can click on details and learn more about those data sets as well. Okay. Oh, wrong way. Okay. So I wanted to close today and thank you all for joining us, especially on this journey talking about the data operations model, showing you some neat things and kind of opening the box on where we're thinking our direction is going. We're hitting all of the keywords along the way, all through that data lifecycle. I'll take an opportunity now to open it up for any questions or comments. Happily to take your feedback and answer any questions.
Hi, Megan. We've had one from Charlene Avey. She'd like to know on the new Indiana map, as you call it, how would someone contact somebody to submit stories for this, like focus items?
So do you mean to submit new data?
Well, why don't you answer that way? And also, I think at that point you were highlighting certain things. For example, like it was like who were your elected officials? That was like a focus area at that point.
Oh,
But
yes. Okay.
let's actually answer that question in two different ways.
Okay. So if we're talking about Indiana in the news or the popular apps and resources, and also any data on this side, also for the under this contact button, you will see a way to submit a request to add data. If you have a statewide data set that you'd like to have added to the map, or if you'd like to put some things in the news, or if you'd like to show to share with us popular apps and resources, there'll be it's really going to work through Survey 123. Probably Survey 123 Connect, I think, and submit a request or submit an idea for things that can go onto the site. The idea here being that this is, as we've said, an Indiana GIS community resource. The feedback from the community is what built this, and the feedback from the community is what's going to continue to improve it. So we certainly want a way for you to be able to reach out to us and say, this is what we think needs to happen with the site. This is the data that we need to have added. Or here's a really neat story. Can you show it on Indiana in the news? So please, that will be a function underneath the contact tab. I hope that answered your question, Charlene.
Yes, it actually did. That
Okay.
absolutely did. And just Megan, before we continue, just please know over in the chat, there's so much like, oh, this is great. This is great. You know, this is making me breathe easier. So that's really great. But we do have a couple of questions. John Milburn asked, did the state go with a Creative Commons license for this?
Good question. So as part of that data operations model, one of the things that we really need to unpack is that Creative Commons. We've talked a little bit before about CC0. We kind of have that now with our Indiana open data strategy. It's just not something that we've advertised. That, John, as you know, and I think that we've talked about this, it's complicated because of all of the data that's being hosted. So does that require different agreements? Does it require everyone to sign off? Our open data strategy hasn't had to do that. So I don't think so. But if it did, I'd like to at least have some real strong governance around what that looks like. So I guess in short, that was the long answer. In short, I think we'll have to see what that looks like in the future.
Great, thank you. Hey, we've had a couple questions regarding, talk about where this is going to be hosted.
This is going to be hosted on the GIO's hub site, on our platform.
Great. And obviously this is only in demo purposes only. It's not available to the public. We can't give a link quite yet.
Not giving you a URL yet.
Sorry, guys. What else?
Anything else?
No, people are just saying, you know, great leadership, Megan. This is just great. They're just so happy with this. So thank you.
Well, that's awesome. That's good to hear. I think I showed my last slide. Yeah. So my email address, gio@iot.in.gov. If there's something from this presentation that kind of piques your interest, you want to give some feedback in the meantime before the site's live, where you can submit your pieces of suggestions, please feel free to reach out and share it with us. We'd love to hear your feedback.
Okay, first of all, Chris Denneman, can you show the bottom of the page? So can you keep scrolling down?
Oh, thanks. There it is. All right, so right here at the bottom, and I think we're going to have it in here too. So thank you so much, Chris. Chris, as always, as has for a long time, really driven the way that Indiana sees data that's made available to the public. So it feels really right to have him as a part of this project. So thank you, Chris. Here is where we have some survey opportunities as well. So we might put some different questions in here, and we'll probably have the link to that also, adding data opportunity. Thank you for that reminder, Chris.
So we have a couple more questions. A question is, will all of the data be hosted through the site, or will it link out to other archives like the current Indiana map does?
So I would imagine that depending on the way that the data is available, as long as it's available through a feature service, we would just connect through a feature service. If it is not available that way, then we might be able to store it and then host it up. So it kind of depends. And it depends on the data set.
So another question from Charlene. Will we be able to learn who is using the data?
Good question. So we came across an opportunity to have folks have to sign in to be able to access the data. We haven't done that before now. So this is actually using a Hub Premium license. So anybody who has an ArcGIS Online login can log in and access it. Like I said, you can save those maps to your account. If you do not, you can create a profile. But it's not a requirement to access the data to sign in. So we'll know some usage, and I believe we can gain some analytics off of some of this, but not necessarily exactly who is accessing the data.
Okay, a couple more. So is the web GIS system still based on ArcGIS Online? You were mentioning that you were transitioning from ArcGIS Enterprise to AWS, but it seems like that's just on the storage side?
So we're moving our enterprise into an AWS portal. Now, where Hub lives, this is an infrastructure question that I'm not really prepared to answer. So I might have to get back to you on that. Or if somebody who's also working on this project, Sean, if you guys want to put in the chat the answer to that, I'm not entirely sure exactly how that functionality works.
Okay.
Crowdsourcing that answer.
Absolutely. So there's actually just a couple comments too. So Matt Robinson, who is actually with Esri, he says that ArcGIS Hub provides view metrics and also integrates with Google Analytics, so individual downloads can actually be tracked. So thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. Absolutely.
Thanks, Matt. See, it really does take a village.
That's right.
And it has taken a village for us to get here, and it's going to take one for us to stay relevant, to keep this updated, and that's absolutely our intention. The maintenance on this to be as reliable as possible. And I mentioned back, even away from the open data site, the data governance piece is going to be really critical. Maintaining the metadata is going to be really critical. So working with all of our partners and data providers to be sure that they are meeting those data standards, and not the standards like the harvest standards, but the standards like the metadata standards, and that we are keeping true so that everything is very reliable and there's not a lot of question from data set to data set. Excuse me.
Great. So an important question. This one's actually from Matt Johnson. So what data will we be hosting? Is it the entire set of data that is currently available?
If it's relevant and makes sense, and if it's timely, sure. There's no limit on how much data. The only requirement that we've had is that it needs to be open. So it needs to not be secured type of data. And it also needs to be a statewide data set. At this time, we don't have the business case for statewide data, open data, is really to have a full statewide perspective. If a use case comes up that we just had a regional data set, I would be interested in talking with the data providers on that. But I don't see a limit in what can be hosted here, as long as it's open data.
Okay.
I said hosted, but hosted and served. I want to be clear about that because we might not be hosting it, but we might be able to serve it or make that connection to the data.
Okay. What else, folks? Got a couple minutes left. Megan, we just continue to get positive comments, so that is great.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks.
Especially regarding barriers that you do not have to have an account to access the information and things like that. So that was that was great to lift those barriers.
I'm really interested to see the folks that are not active GIS users that don't necessarily have those online accounts, and see what the I guess how many non-GIS people are actually accessing it. Because I know now, so our office is fielding the info@Indiana Maps questions that come in on the current Indiana map. And in answering those questions, we see a lot of people that are novice GIS people or not a GIS people at all. So it's I think it'll be neat to see utilizing the Hub Premium tools, who is actually accessing or how many people.
Okay, we have another question. Will the LiDAR data still be hosted in OpenTopo or will it be here?
So for now, the LiDAR data is going to be hosted in OpenTopo. We also have a great partnership, as you all might know, with Jin Ha at Purdue. He's helping to host the data too. Hosting the LiDAR data has been a bit of a challenge. There is a current fundraiser actually open to try and fundraise money to put the latest LiDAR over at OpenTopo. We would connect to that from here, but I don't necessarily think it would be hosted here, and unless we cache it. And now I'm out of my league on how we might do that.
Megan, I think that's about all the questions.
Awesome.
Going once. Keep them coming if necessary.
Well, like I said, if you guys want, please reach out to me, send me an email. Excuse me. And I'd be happy to talk with you more. We're really excited. You'll see more of this. Follow our newsletter. You'll see updates as they become available, and certainly when the site goes public. I want to say that this was not built at the current Indiana map, and that project that began years ago as the Southwest Indiana Atlas did not get built quickly. It took a lot of time, and this is going to take us some time. We're going to put up, not every layer is going to be available right away, and not every process is going to be available right away. So please be patient, but your input is most appreciated. So thank you, everyone, and thank you again. Thank you, Amanda, for your wonderful hosting of this, but also your wonderful work on GIS Day. And congratulations to everyone who participated. And thank you to everybody who helped with your presentations, to giving us your presentations, and also those room monitors and folks who helped us on the technical side as well. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll go ahead and close.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.